everybody, and welcome back to VETchat. I'm Kathryn Bell, CEO of the Webinar Vet, and today I am very excited to continue with our podcasts focusing on women's health. So today we are going to be hearing from a brand new guest, Sharon MacArthur, to discuss all about the menopause, how it is critical not only to boost veterinary practice success, but also its financial health. So let me tell you a little bit about Sharon before we get started. Miss Menopause was formed over 6 years ago in response to the lack of information about the menopause in the workplace. Sharon has dedicated herself to bridging this knowledge gap by working both face-to-face and online with organisations of all sizes, including those in very male-dominated industries. Despite initial reluctance, some of the most profound feedback comes from male colleagues who have said her training is the best training they've done in a very long time. Today, organisations are starting to recognise that the menopause is a critical business issue affecting every colleague. If menopause isn't part of your mental health, well-being and EDI plans, you're missing a crucial component. Sharon's mission is to make the menopause business as usual, ensuring everyone is included in the conversation because she believes ignorance can no longer be an excuse. Sharon's expertise has been showcased on BBC Breakfast, ITN News, Channel 5 and the Victoria Derbyshire show, and she is also a regular voice on BBC Radio discussing the menopause. And we're delighted that she is with us today. So welcome to VETchat.
Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Excellent, thank you. So to kick us off, Sharon, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to focus on the menopause?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to be a senior leader in a FTSE 100 company. I used to be in charge of millions of pounds worth of revenue. And then I left the corporate world, shall we say, and I set up a coaching business, which was doing very, very well. And I started to get these weird and wonderful things that began to happen to me. I was really tired all of the time. I had a week of, I could only describe it as agoraphobia, where I couldn't leave the house. And all I can say is one of my very best friends dared to say to me, "Sharon, do you not think you're menopausal?" And I was absolutely outraged, let me tell you. I was like, how dare you think that could be me? Because at this point in my lifetime, although I thought I was pretty smart, I knew nothing about menopause. So I kind of parked that idea, and then more weird and wonderful, wild things kept happening to me. Very strange. I was hot in the night. I couldn't sleep. And I started to do an element of research, I suppose, and started to begin to think, maybe my friend's right. Maybe this could be menopause. And I started to do lots of research, and there was a couple of catalysts, really, that set me off down this route. I did a mental health first aid course. And it wasn't in there. So we spent 2 whole days in the classroom learning lots of stuff. It was very, very comprehensive, but there was nothing about menopause. And I thought, well, that's really strange, because I'm feeling really, really anxious and worried and concerned in a time of life where I've never, ever felt like that before. And then I ended up joining something called the British Menopause Society as a lay person. I'm not medically trained. I don't pretend or profess to be. And I spent the day with 60 doctors. And they didn't really seem to know very much about menopause either. So I can only say, Kathryn, as an angry menopausal woman, I decided that I needed to go out there into the world and really start conversations about menopause. Because when I first set up, it's nearly 7 years now, nobody wanted to talk to me about the menopause. People thought I was absolutely crazy. So I keep saying, maybe I'm a genius with my tongue firmly in my cheek. But it's really, really important because if you look at the statistics of menopause, every single person on the planet, directly or indirectly, is going to be impacted by this life event. So it's really quite fascinating that lots and lots of work has been done and will continue to be done about mental health and well-being, quite rightly so, I might add. But yet menopause was hiding in plain sight with nobody really talking about it, and certainly most of us not even knowing anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, okay. And what sort of age were you, if you don't mind me asking, when all these sort of symptoms started happening?
Oh, well, I was 47, nearly 48, but when I reflect back, I would say menopause had begun for me certainly, probably into my about 43, 44, because I remember driving into work crying in the car, and I didn't know why I was crying in the car. Just so I think you can often solely say this in the rear view mirror. I didn't know at the time. And the really tricky thing about menopause, any of the listeners who love a process, who absolutely love a process, menopause isn't one of them. So the thing is with menopause, and it's a really important point to make, the majority of women will mostly experience symptoms of menopause months and even years before they notice a change in their periods. And that's the thing, if they're even having them, because now in the 21st century, many, many women are tapping into contraception. So you're talking about Depo injections, Mirena coils, mini pills, which means they aren't even having periods. So how on earth are you supposed to know that what's happening here could be linked to this menopause thing here? It's practically impossible to know what it's all about. And because it doesn't follow that linear route, and because every single person will be unique and different, there's no one size fits all. So it's really, really tough to understand what's happening. Is it menopause? Is it something else? What on earth is this thing that's happening to me? And the saddest thing that people say to me, I guess, Kathryn, is most women say to me, Sharon, I thought I had early onset dementia. And that to me is just really, really terrifying, because sadly, most of us tend to have dementia somewhere in our family history.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, yeah, that really is terrifying.
Yeah.
So what are some of the sort of common symptoms that you experience personally? And do they tend to be quite common with other people that you work with?
Well, I could show you a sheet. I've got about 70 symptoms. Not that I've had personally. I mean, a lot of women who say, Sharon, I've got them all. I'm like, you don't get a prize for having a full house. That's not really what this is all about. But the most common symptoms that are reported to me, number one, is anxiety. So if you think you've got mental health and well-being covered, and anxiety is the number one most common symptom, then I'm here to say you probably haven't. Closely followed by brain fog, which gives you anxiety. So that's the inability to remember simple words and phrases that you know. And that really, that's terrifying, because if you can't remember your own name in a sentence, it makes women particularly begin to think, well, I can't do this job anymore, especially if they're doing complex work, if they're doing clinical work, we're talking about veterinary surgeons, they're doing surgery, whatever that might be. And you forget what you're doing midway through, that would be utterly terrifying. Tiredness. Now, I usually say it's not really tiredness how women describe it. So I would describe it as exhaustion, where it felt like somebody would pull my plug out. So I could be absolutely fine 1 minute, and then the next minute, doof, the plug's pulled out, and I'm kind of in a heap on the floor, feeling really, really tired. Night sweats, day sweats, night sweats, but not everyone will show obvious signs of being hot, but they're still feeling those sensations in their own body. And then insomnia is really, really common. So what I say is, in the end, if I was to tell you my story, in the end, my most untenable symptom was my inability to remain asleep. I've never had a problem getting to sleep, but then it would be 2 a.m. in the morning. So I was like, bing, wide awake. And it got so bad for me that I fell asleep at the wheel of my car when I was driving at speed. So if you think about some of the listeners, they're doing lots of driving, I'm sure, on occasion, depending on the type of work that they do. And I really did think menopause was going to kill me, because I just no longer could find sleep at all. I just couldn't sleep. And those really are quite common symptoms. But the symptoms can be as wild and wacky as dry eye, itchy skin, bleeding mouth of gums, hair growth, hair loss. My favourite one, I have to tell you, is electric shocks. Now, I wish it meant that you turned into a superhero going through menopause and you could zap anyone with electricity. But I mean becoming statically electrically charged. So what that means is, anything that you touch, you can get like a spark or electric shock from. So the best stories I've heard recently, one woman said, I can't touch my cat or my husband. I was like, every cloud. And another one said, I can't switch the light switches on. But, it's a really strange, and I haven't got to the bottom of why that's happening, but it's a really common symptom. So there's just a vast range of symptoms that you could encounter.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. And if people are starting to, feel like they're getting some of these symptoms, or what would your advice be for these people? Would you say go and speak to a doctor, or what would you suggest?
Well, first of all, I'd probably track your symptoms over a period of time. So, and I guess the gift I would like to give your listeners today would be, and it's a gift I try and give everybody that I meet, is this. is whatever it is, and let's imagine that you believe it's menopause,
Mm-hmm.
is this negatively impacting the quality of my life? And if the answer is yes, doing nothing shouldn't be an option. And that's probably one of the best gifts I can give you, because I talk about there are several ways you can manage menopause. There's the medical route, there's the herbal route, there's what I call the holistic route, and then there's DIY. So I think it would be good to track your symptoms to see, are there patterns forming? Are there certain things that are happening to me at certain times of the day or certain times of the month, whatever that might be. And then I always recommend that do some research yourself. So the great news is now, we're in 2024, when I was on my menopause journey, there was really no information at all. And there's tons and tons of information out there. You can watch things depending on your learning style. You can read, you can listen to podcasts like this. So there's lots of ways you can absorb information. And then depending on which one you want to choose, so not every woman will want to take HRT, for example, or maybe go down the medical route, although that's the route that I've gone down. I'm on conventional HRT, I'm on vaginal HRT, I'm on testosterone, but it's your body, your choice. And what I'm saying is there's no right or wrong on how you choose to manage menopause. There's only what's right for you, but don't do nothing. So I would suggest track your symptoms, do some research, and then make a decision on, I was advised, what's the symptom that's hurting you the most, I guess. So if you list a list of symptoms, because the thing is with menopause, you don't tend to get a symptom and then it stops, you get another symptom. Menopause normally throws loads of symptoms at you at one time. So if you check and say, well, for me, it was sleep. Not being able to sleep was really detrimental, I felt, to everything else. So I took that one symptom and I did lots of research on that one symptom. And then I looked at what could the options be to help me manage my sleep better. And in the end, I chose to go down the HRT route. But in fact, it took me 18 months of trial and error, Kathryn, to get to that outcome. Because up to then, in my own words, I'd faffed around for so long, it took me 18 months of trial and error to get to that point. So, for example, my story is, I first of all tried sage leaf tablets. That was the thing that I was drawn to first of all. And after 2 weeks of taking these tablets, all I felt was sick, because all I could taste was sage and onion stuffing, repeating back at me was vile. And the thing is with menopause, I've decided to christen menopausal women as live living experiments. And that's because what might work for me may never work for somebody else and vice versa. So it really is a trial and error process. So for me, for example, I've met several women who say sage leaf tablets for them were incredible. But for me, they just didn't touch the sides. And then next, I came across what I believe, because I was constantly doing lots of research and lots of reading, I came across what I believe to be a wonder drug, and that was magnesium. And what's brilliant about magnesium is you can eat it, you can wear it, and you can bathe in the stuff. And let me tell you, I was doing all three. I was spitting it all over, I was taking the tablets, and I was jumping in the bath. And it worked a little bit. And then because I was doing lots and lots of research, I went to my doctor, who suggested that I should have antidepressants. Now, I now realise that was not necessarily the best advice I could have been given. And the best advice would have been to be given information about hormone replacement therapy. It doesn't mean to say that I should take it, but at least getting that information would have been really, really helpful. But that didn't happen. And I had to take these antidepressants for a minimum of 6 months. And a couple of months in, there was a slight reduction, but by month 3, there was no change at all. And because it wasn't really working, I was constantly still researching until eventually I couldn't find a reason, medically or a logical reason, why I shouldn't try hormone replacement therapy. So I think my doctor was quite surprised when I marched back into the surgery, said, look, I would like HRT, I'd like it now. And the brilliant news is within 2 weeks, all of my symptoms went.
Wow.
All of my symptoms went. But it took me 18 months. And I think what women don't appreciate is, for most of us, the majority, it's going to take some energy and effort to try different things, to find the things that work for you as an individual. And like I keep saying, that's why I've christened menopausal women as live living experiments. Because if you could say all Sharons born in 1968 who have a big problem with the leopard print, I can't stop buying it and wearing it, we're going to manage their menopause like this, and the symptoms would be like that. then the world would be incredible.
Mm.
And I often say, wouldn't you believe, I'm surely most people would believe that if anyone was going to have an identical menopause, it would be identical twin sisters, wouldn't it? Well, I've met tons of identical twin sisters over the years, and they have all had a unique experience of menopause. And that's why we have to open up the conversation, and we have to enable each individual to tell their own story, because everyone will have a unique story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's brilliant. And I guess it's the same in work, right, as well. If you're a manager or, you're managing people who are going through the menopause, there's not necessarily one approach that will fit everybody in the team.
There absolutely isn't. And I always say, because people often say, well, I'm a manager, I'm a leader in this business, what should I do? Well, the first thing to do is to get educated on it yourself if you're not completely sure, and educate your people as well. So education is really the key, I would say, to open up the conversations. But I think one of the simplest things you can do is you could ask the person, what small reasonable adjustments do you think may help you in the workplace? How brilliant would that, and how easy is that if you ask people what might help them? And what I say about menopause is I think a lot of people get really scared when they hear of things like menopause, they hear of neurodiversity topics. They really worry about, I'm going to get this wrong, and it's really terrifying to me. But what I say all of the time when I'm working in businesses up and down the country is, most of the things you're going to need when it comes to menopause, you've probably already got. And so that's a big relief, isn't it? So an example I would give as a great example would be the disclosure of pregnancy. Now, I'm sure in your practices up and down the land, people have disclosed a pregnancy. So what I would say is, if somebody's disclosed a pregnancy in your place of work, what might you do? Well, you might give me a car parking space near the office if you thought that was appropriate. You might do a workstation assessment, and you might give me some equipment like a footrest or a desk fan. You might enable me to have a review of hours, a review of duties. You might enable me to have time off for appointments. So what I'm saying to managers and leaders of the world is this: all you really have to do when it comes to menopause is look in your small reasonable adjustment toolkit, which I know many of you already have, and just flip and apply those things in there to menopause. And one of my key messages is simplicity is the key. Simplicity is the key in using what you've been doing when you've been talking about mental health and well-being, when you've been talking about, other subject matters when it comes to health and well-being and ED&I, all of the things that you might already have touched upon, you can just apply to menopause as a topic, because this gives you an understanding of some of the root causes of the behavior of your people. So, for example, if I've never been sick for many, many years, and then all of a sudden I start coming in late, or I'm putting in sick days, and that's never really happened. Well, if you've had some information about menopause could in fact be the root cause and the reason behind that sickness, behind that lateness. And the other thing that I'm big on, and I know you talked about that in the introduction, is to make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to learn about menopause. This isn't just information for women of a certain age. That's my least favorite phrase, by the way. And that's because technically menopause could happen to women at any age. And so if you can educate everybody, some of the most profound feedback I've had has come from male colleagues. Now, often left to their own devices, they kind of see the subject matter of menopause and think, well, that's got nothing to do with me. That's never going to happen to me. But what I would say to male colleagues is, if you identify as male heterosexual, the chances are you will be going home to wives, partners, and girlfriends at the very least, who I can guarantee to you will absolutely all be going through menopause at some point in their lifetime. And when I've worked with male colleagues who said, Sharon, I think this information would help to save my marriage or my relationship, that to me is when you're working with and for an employer of choice. So what I'm saying is, I don't believe this information about menopause can harm anybody, but I truly believe it can help absolutely everybody. So when we talk about inclusivity, I really want organizations to understand that educating everybody about the subject is a brilliant thing to do, and it can't harm any of your colleagues. It can only help them. And then if you're looking to bring in, younger people into your organization, whatever level that might be, well, we know women are statistically having children later in life. We know that's a statistical trend. And we know that young people are finding it really difficult to leave their family homes because it's too expensive. So
Yeah.
what about young people who could be living with menopausal mothers?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, let me tell you an interesting story. So I was working, in a session, and a younger woman eventually shouted up to me, Sharon, do you know what? I think my mother could be going through the menopause. And I said, okay, that's really interesting. And also what's interesting is that is often we might spot signs in others long before they spot signs in themselves.
Yeah.
So she said, when I left for work this morning, she threw a butter dish at my head. So I was like, well, that's not a regular symptom of menopause that I've come across, but I really take your point. She
Yeah.
said, she's shouting at me, she's throwing things around. She said, I really, really don't want to spend any time with my mother anymore. So what was really interesting, all because the younger person had been learning about menopause, that younger woman was able to go home and have an open, honest, adult conversation with her mother, who didn't know she was in the early stages of menopause.
Oh,
And
wow.
again, remember, that's not uncommon because most women will find they have symptoms of menopause months and even years before they notice they're having a change in their periods. That's if they're even having them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So she was able to encourage her mother. She went down what I call the medical route. She ended up on HRT. So all because this younger woman came to a session around menopause, not only is she more prepared for her own menopause, but it transformed the relationship between her and her mother. So her home life was greatly improved. So I want everyone to think about menopause in this way, that it has tentacles that reach into the corners of every single person's life.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's incredible. Wow. And
Yeah.
what about if you have people who just don't get it or just don't want to do the training? Do you have any tips for like how you can deal with them?
Really, what you have to do is you have to you have to work pretty hard with those people. I have to
Yeah.
be honest. And what I always say when I work with organizations, large and small, is what you really need to do is you need to get your influencers into those education workshop sessions. So you
Mm-hmm.
might have to go and knock on the door. So everybody's got somebody who's probably holding on and kind of going, well, I don't think I need to know that information. But if you can say to them, look, I really value your feedback. You've worked here a long time now, and I understand that looking at the subject until, terms of this, the title of it, you're thinking, well, that's got nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I say, please, will you come along and just hear the session out? Because what I'd really value is your open and honest feedback on the back of that.
Yeah.
What I've found is by getting those influential people along, and they may not even be managers or leaders in your practices, they may just be people who've been there for a long time who are influential with the rest of the people in your organization. Once they get it, they really quite quickly become advocates. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I'll tell you an interesting story. I was working with a large company on site, and there was a big group of guys came into the session. And all I can say is they shuffled in. They were like, oh my goodness, I don't really want to be here. And one of the guys, every time I looked in his direction, he kind of put his head down like this. And I thought, hey, he's never going to leave this session and tell anybody else about what he's learned. But
Yeah.
according to his HR person, he went home that evening. He spoke to his wife for over 2 hours about the subject. Then he rang his mother up to tell her what he'd learned about the subject. And now he's strutting around, his workplace, telling everyone who listen that they really do need to learn about menopause in the workplace. And that's the power of engaging people in the right way, because rather than becoming detractors at the very outset, they can quite quickly become advocates and help you to spread the message. And really, I hope one day, Kathryn, I'll be made redundant, to be honest, because that would mean that menopause has just become business as usual. And
Yeah.
that's what I would hope, that we can just open up, our own stories. And I would say to every company in the land, whoever you are, whatever size you are, the gold dust in your business are the stories that each of us hold about ourselves. So again, if you can get some influencers and maybe some key practice managers, some key people in your business to tell their own story, that is so, so powerful.
Yeah.
So the most, the most touched and emotional I've ever been in any of the businesses I've worked in is where you get maybe the heads of department, the people in charge, the owners of that business to stand up and tell their story.
Mm.
It's so, so powerful. And if you can get, men might have stories about, their wives, partners, and girlfriends that they're living with, and the impact menopause might have had on them indirectly. That is very valid information, and it helps other people to understand what's happening to me. You might never have thought, well, I didn't know that was happening to Sharon. I'm just unlocking your story and sharing that with others. But you have to create that culture of psychological safety to enable people to not feel vulnerable and feel, scared and worried about sharing their story. So again, it comes back to the culture and the environment that you're working in. But if it's your practice and if you're in charge, you can change that by being brave and vulnerable and sharing your own story.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, that's great advice, Sharon. Thank you. And we touched upon right at the start as well, and I know we've spoken about it previously. If businesses don't take the menopause seriously, then they're going to miss out financially. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit for us, please?
Well, ultimately, you're going to lose great people. Now, the biggest expense are humans in any business. It takes a long time to recruit them and attract them. So once you've recruited them and attracted them, surely if they're good people, you want to keep them, you want to retain them. And so all that knowledge, all that expertise. So if we're talking about menopause, for most women, I'm not saying for all women, because menopause, as I said earlier, could happen to women at any age. And the saddest case that I've read about was a young girl of 12, which just goes to prove that menopause technically could happen to women at any age. But most women are going to begin to encounter menopause in and around their 40s. So if you think about all of that knowledge, all that expertise that's been gained since qualification, somebody's getting to their 40s, they've probably had time off for children, they come back and they think, right, all I have to do now is power towards my retirement, and I probably look towards, getting promotions and learning new things. But what happens to women in their mid-40s is when they hit menopause, like I say, the saddest thing women say is they think they often have early onset dementia. So usually what happens is I feel that's a perfect storm happening, because one day women are waking up, putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 46. So you might even know some of these women. They could be colleagues, they could be friends, they could be family members of yours. And they're starting to say things like, I've lost my confidence, just can't do that anymore. So usually within less than 6 months, those women have put 2 and 2 together, come up with 46, told themselves they're no longer capable of doing the work that perhaps they've been doing for many, many years, and they're leaving. So all that talent, all that knowledge, all that expertise is drifting away out of utter ignorance. So far from becoming more diverse over time, there's a danger that individual companies will become less diverse if they don't tackle things like menopause. And then there's the impact on male colleagues as well. So don't just think this is exclusively, for your female colleagues. What about those male colleagues who are coming in? Maybe they're coming in late and they've never been late before. But the reason is they're living with a menopausal wife, partner, or girlfriend who's no longer sleeping, and now they're sleep deprived. So what impact is that having on their productivity, their ability to think straight, their ability to drive without thinking like me? They're going to fall asleep at the wheel. So like I said earlier, it really does have tentacles that reach into the corners of everybody's life. And if you think about it, here in the UK, not just the UK, it's a phenomenon in other countries. We've got an aging population, which means we've got an aging workforce. So we can ill afford to lose good quality members of staff who've gained all of that extra knowledge and expertise into their 40s and beyond. Because even if you were to replace them, the chances are you'd be replacing with a much more junior individual, and you're never going to replace that like for like. So it really, really is a business issue. And the costs, if you looked at the cost of attraction, the cost of recruitment, the cost of retention, and then training a new person if they left, those costs can be enormous.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it 1 in 10 women leave the workforce at the moment because of the menopause?
Well, that's what the statistics say. But there's lies, damn lies in statistics. All you have to know is women have been leaving and will continue to leave if they don't know about what's happening to their minds and bodies and they think they've got dementia. They're just checking out of the workforce, which means they're poorer in retirement and you're losing good people. So I don't think it really matters whether you think it's 1 in 10. The question to ask is, can I afford to lose a good quality member of staff out of ignorance?
Yeah.
I think that is probably a better way of looking at it, because even one person leaving your practice, if they're a valued member of staff and you really value what they do, and imagine they were to leave because they didn't understand what was happening to their minds and bodies, and maybe nobody in your place of work understood that either, they would eventually just drift away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're just running out of time, Sharon. It's
Okay.
absolutely flown by. Thank you.
Yeah, it has.
We've covered a lot of ground there, but was there anything else that you wanted to add that we've not covered that you'd like our listeners to be aware of?
Just keep it really simple. So
Yeah.
think of menopause like this: educate everybody if you can, and use what you already have in most cases to help you manage menopause. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start from scratch, and you don't have to be scared and worried about this subject. All women want is to understand what's happening to their minds and bodies, to being able to work through this life event. And surely, as employers, what we want to do is attract and retain the best possible talent, recognizing that menopause could touch the lives of everybody in your practice, and just enable them to work through it.
That's great, Sharon. Thank you so much. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, are you happy for them to do so? What's the best way?
Absolutely. Well, I've got a website, which is missmenopause.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, but if you look for Sharon MacArthur, Miss Menopause, I'm sure you will find me.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great, Sharon. Thank you so much again
Thank
for
you.
joining us today. You gave some really good advice and good tips for people, so I'm sure our listeners will have loved listening to you as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.